You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Welcome along to the Straight to Video podcast. I hope you're all doing okay and things are going great for you all out there. Today's episode is, well, it's a cool one for me as it's a meeting of two of my favourite things, music and movies. My guest on today's show is singer-songwriter Audrey Spillman, who spoke to me from her home in Nashville. Audrey's music plays on the influences of being in and around the Nashville country music scene, but also has these wonderful elements of folk, some jazz leanings, and at times there's a great almost gospel element to some of the songs. The songwriting and emotion could easily be conveyed with just guitar and vocal, or perhaps just piano and vocal, but it also translates into the larger-than-life recordings which are on her most recent album, Thornbird. Now, I feel I went into review mode a little there, but I wanted to give you guys a good insight into the music Audrey writes and records. So where does the movie element come into all of this, I can hear you all ask. So I have a couple of go-to movies which never get old for me, and they're both music related. The first is Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous, and the other is the Stephen Dorff Beatles biopic Backbeat, all about their original bass player Stuart Sutcliffe. I can guarantee you that if you were to watch either of those films with me, you would see me both laugh and most definitely cry in certain parts, but they will never fail to ignite that love and passion I still have for music and particularly live performance. It's a weird thing, and I think a lot of touring musicians who know these films will agree. You might not have been to the locations or places these films are set, but they somehow manage to convey the feeling so well that you know that venue, you know that hotel room, you know that loading area, well, they just evoke particular emotions in you and it really warms something inside you. So a couple of years ago I added another film to that list, and it was the 2017 film Wheeler, again featuring Stephen Dorff, who was in Backbeat, and I was intrigued with the premise of the film when I heard Stephen talking about it on a Mark Maron podcast. Stephen comes from a musical family. Both his father and his late brother Andrew are world-famous country music songwriters, and while Stephen is known as an actor, that fire burns in him too. Wheeler tells the story of a singer-songwriter from Texas who travels to Nashville feeling this will be his last shot to make it in the music industry. What is particularly unique about this film, though, is that Dorff plays the lead role, but it is filmed in a mockumentary style, seeing him disguised with prosthetic makeup, which allows him to, let's say, infiltrate Nashville and interact with real people rather than actors. Only a select number of people are in on the concept, which really makes this film feel so real. Now, I've watched this film numerous times, and each time I feel a warmth and connection with Wheeler's enthusiasm and passion when he arrives in Nashville and the things he experiences. And like I said earlier, heck, I've never been there, but it's so easy to relate to certain elements. One of the people who was in on the whole concept of the film and played one of the lead roles is today's guest, Audrey Spillman, who in the film plays herself, a singer-songwriter in Nashville who befriends Wheeler and helps him on his journey. As you will hear, Audrey and I spoke the morning after all the recent crazy events in Washington DC, but I want to thank Audrey for chatting about her career and also her involvement in what has become one of my favourite films, and I hope you'll all enjoy it. Check out Audrey's music, which you can find at audreyspillmanmusic.com, or find her on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. And if the sound of the film Wheeler intrigues you, then I urge you all to check it out. As for me, it's amazing. But in the meantime, please enjoy my chat with the wonderful Audrey Spillman.
Dirty green being passed around, changing faces in the crowd. Lights turn to dust, the sun turns to rust and to the ground. Rumors are spreading around. He's the one who's gonna burn this town into his flesh and bone, rebuild it as his own. Go and tell your fathers, warn his sons and daughters. And trouble's rising up. Trouble's rising up. Oh, the pain that follows, gonna leave you Trouble's rising up.
Hey.
How's it going?
Oh, there you are. Oh, I made it work.
It's always very touch and go whether everything's going to connect, whether the audio's going to connect and all the video and stuff.
I know. I'm proud of myself.
Nice one. How you doing?
I'm good.
Awesome stuff.
I'm going to turn this up. We have, our country is in such a great place right now. So
Yesterday looked pretty nuts.
it was pretty awful.
Has it all kind of quietened down this morning? Or is the news network still going crazy?
Pretty crazy. It's pretty nuts. It's the worst I've ever seen. I mean, worse than a lot of people have ever seen. Not even what side you're on or that sort of thing. Because I like to plead the Dolly Parton on that. I don't like to talk politics really because she doesn't ever talk politics.
Let's talk about music. Let's twist it.
Okay.
Thank you ever so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If I'm right, you grew up on St. Simon's Island, just off Georgia.
Yes, that's right.
It's somewhere I'm not familiar with, but I was like looking online. The place looked amazing.
Yeah, it's great. It's very Southern Gothic, I would say, which is the draw of it. And there's a lot of history there. And I think I just was super influenced. I lived on what they call East Beach. And it's just this little small island that you get to through the marsh, what they call the Bloody Marsh. There was a huge fight there. And so it's just one of the most magical and beautiful and creative places. And it just has had such an influence on me all my life. In fact, I go there once a year, if not twice a year, and go there on vacation. So my mom, she was a painter and still is a painter. So she would take her easel down to the beach and me as a toddler toting me, and she would paint and I would just play and do all that sort of thing.
Is it like a pretty big area?
No, it's pretty small. Not a lot of people know about it unless you're from Atlanta, Georgia, which is a huge city. And a lot of people go there on vacation. There's another island there called Sea Island, which is a very prominent island. I think like John Travolta and a few other movie stars had or have places there and have flown their planes. But where I lived was just a small little coastal beach town and has since now grown. But when I was there, it was a lot smaller and more quaint. But there's not a lot of places to grow as far as buildings and that sort of thing. So that's what I like about it, is that it will always keep that charm.
So did you go to school there, or did you have to travel to the mainland? I can't get my head out how big this actually is.
Yeah, so I kind of moved around a little bit. So we moved from there when I was 5, and we moved to a small town in Kentucky. And my dad was a photographer. So my mom's a painter, my dad's a photographer. And so I was destined to do something creative, I guess. But he ended up getting a job in Kentucky as a photographer and traveled around shooting places like the Smoky Mountains, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like it's more of like, it's just where Dolly Parton's from. She's from that area, Sevierville. And he would go there to take pictures for the Chamber of Commerce. And my mom, she worked at a daycare and also painted on the side. And so I lived there until the time I was in middle school and went there all through elementary and middle school. And then in high school, moved to Nashville and lived there. So I kind of hopped around, but St. Simon's has always been the main place that I've always come back to. And eventually probably will move there or have a house there.
That must have been great to have parents both in creative industries, because it kind of gives you that open-minded option that you can do that as a career.
Yes, I was so fortunate and so lucky looking back now that I had 2 creative parents that understood that, because I feel like that is it's a make or break. If you don't have that support, people obviously continue on and they just make their own decision, but it's such a huge, huge part of the whole creative process and journey of having that support and saying, never give up. Because it is so hard. And I don't think you ever get to a point where you're like, I've made it. You're always constantly going, always constantly wanting to better yourself and write a better song. And what do I have next, for yourself? And so my mom still to this day, and my dad as well, are always so encouraging and keep going, keep doing it. I love that, what you're doing and that sort of thing. So I'm very, very fortunate in that way. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, so I would have rather have had that if I had to pick between.
Are either those 2 musical, your mom and dad?
Oh, my dad, not so much. He's not so much musical. I've heard him sing a couple times and that's good enough for me. But my mom, she does have a great voice, and she has always been such an influence on me as far as I remember growing up in St. Simon's, they had an old vinyl record player, and she had Carly Simon and Joni Mitchell and all those sort of folky artists. And she would always sing anything from the Blue album to me, and Circle Game and all those great, great songs. And so that was such a huge influence on me, was her love for music.
Was that kind of like your gateway then to music? That was the first stuff you remember hearing and really enjoying?
Yes, yes. And my dad, he was sort of on the, I don't know if you'd say the other end, but he loved Willie Nelson and more of like the Outlaws, Kris Kristofferson. And so that was sort of his influence. And so the two sort of merged. But where I don't really know where I get sort of the influence or the love of jazz and blues, because neither one of them really introduced that to me, but that has been such a huge influence on me and such a huge, like, I'm so always drawn to that. But it was a great entryway. And again, like just having parents that were such a fan of music was so huge.
What other music was kind of popular at the time you was growing up? Was you kind of an outsider listening to all the folk stuff and jazz?
Well, when I was coming up, it was a lot of like Mariah Carey and more like 90s, I would say. And so more of the R&B world, which is probably where I get a lot of the love for soul music. But I really always listened to Ella Fitzgerald, even in high school, which was like none of my friends were listening to that. And I always just loved that. Just that old, I don't know, just that old lovely sound. Even Julie London, which, I mean, not a lot of people even know who that is. And she just had this amazing tone. I just love tone. I love a person's tone. They don't have to be technically good, but if they have great tone, that resonates with me. And so I've always been drawn to that sort of music.
Where was you finding new music? Was you like going to record stores?
Well, just throughout the years, I would find music through friends and family. I would just kind of like be on my own, like as far as like through the internet, looking for things. And then later on, I would go to the record store and I got really into vinyl. And there's a great record store in Nashville called Grimey's, which is a really well-known record store. And I would go there and look for kind of obscure records. People I dated throughout the years had an influence on me. And there was one guy that I had dated, and he introduced me, God, to so much music like Sparkle Horse and things I never even knew of, but it opened this whole other world to me of just diving into music. There's just no end to it. And so I really just people. I think that's really one of the best ways is just, hey, have you heard this song? Have you heard this record or whatever? So that's my biggest influence.
Especially if someone's like super enthusiastic about it. Like, you got to check this band out.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing about music that's so great. It's just that how it connects people and how it resonates and how it influences. And so finding that group of people that you can connect with that have that same passion and love is so vital, I feel like, to keeping your enthusiasm, especially if you have a connection to the music industry, because it's so easy to get jaded and get so focused and obsessed with the wrong things.
When did you kind of start going to live shows? Was that once you moved to Nashville, or had you been to any shows prior to then?
Well, in Kentucky, there was pretty bleak. I mean, there wasn't really many places to go to. But when I went to Nashville, I would be embarrassed to say my first concert. But
now you got it. Now you can't tease with that.
My first concert was NSYNC, and that probably I don't know if that would tell what my age would be. I've had different people ask, how old are you? And I never give them an exact number. I just always let them guess.
But how great must that show have been? That must have been a great show.
Well, it was pretty, I mean, I got to meet them, which was pretty great. NSYNC, for gosh sakes. But it was great living in Nashville because obviously we have the Ryman Auditorium, and I've seen so many great shows there. And so in high school and beyond, I would go to, could get tickets to the Ryman or to little clubs, Third and Lindsley, the Basement. These are all great little places in Nashville. And the Bluebird, that was one of my first places I saw like a writer's round. And so that was a huge influence on me.
So how old was you when you moved to Nashville?
I was 14 when I moved to Nashville.
Was you familiar with like the music history there at all? Or was it kind of overwhelming once you got there?
I knew a little bit of it. Now, where I lived, I say Nashville because anybody that lives on any suburbs or anything, they always say Nashville. But I lived in Hendersonville, which is a little outside Nashville. And Hendersonville is where Johnny Cash lived. Johnny Cash was living there still at the time, and he had a museum there. And I would see him from time to time at the grocery store. And so there were a few other like older country artists that lived out there. Taylor Swift lived out there. So, obviously going to high school there, I had friends whose parents were in the music industry, whether they were songwriters or they went on the road. And so I started getting more introduced to that, as well as having people say, hey, you want to go to the Opry tonight? I was like, I've never been to the Opry. Let's go. And so we'd go and see a show at the Opry. And, Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not be influenced by that, especially if you've been bitten with the music bug.
At what point was you kind of picking up a guitar or songwriting?
I would say that my first love has always been creative writing. And so when I was, 7 or 8 years old, I used to write short stories and poetry, and I would get into poetry contests and even win some. And that was always my first love, was creative writing. And then when I moved to Nashville, and I always sang too as well, but I never put the two together, the songwriting aspect of it, until really I got to high school. And at 16, my dad said to me, you really should look into being a songwriter. And I was like, a songwriter? What? And he was like, I'm telling you, that's really where it's at. You should be a songwriter. And it's crazy that he would even say that, because he didn't know anything about the music industry. He really encouraged me and influenced me on that, and bought me my first guitar. It wasn't a great guitar, but it was great to me because it was my first one. I still have it. And I really taught myself. I went to a few lessons, but I didn't have the patience. And that's terrible. I just really wanted to write songs.
At what point did you start doing gigs? Because there's actually a clip of you singing Tiny Dancer at Smith's Old Bar in Atlanta.
Gosh, the first proper gig, I would say, happened whenever I was in college. I went to college at Belmont University, and I met a few people there that I connected with, that I started doing music with and writing with. And I played my first gig at this place called Three Crow Bar, which now I just heard shut down. It's a place in Nashville, and East Nashville. And that was my first show. It was this old bar, old smoky bar. And here I am kind of playing more of that time, I would say more like Nora Jonesy type vibe. And so that was my first show, my first experience. I was so nervous, but I did it.
Have you always kind of gone like guitar and vocal, or have you worked together, put in a band together or anything like that?
When I first started out kind of going down that road, it was just me and guitar. But I didn't feel very confident playing guitar. I never really felt the connection to it that I see some of my friends that are just obsessed with the guitar. And they're like, it's a part of who they are. It's like their arm or something, I feel that way with the piano more than I do guitar. So I linked up with this guy who I met in college, and he played piano. And so he and I worked to put a band together, and we would play in Nashville kind of starting out. And I started getting a lot of local support. And then through that, I would play like in New York or Atlanta. And then I eventually was like, I should probably put a record out. Again, I didn't know. I was just figuring it out as I went. I had friends that helped me, because there's such a great supportive community in Nashville of independent songwriters and artists. And so we kind of all help each other out, kind of figure it all out. And I put a record together, and I got introduced to this producer, Nielsen Hubbard, through a friend of mine, Matthew Pearman Jones, who's a songwriter. And he was like, you should really work with him. I think you guys would work really well together. And so I finally had somebody that I could work with, that I could put an album out. So when I went to shows, I had something to sell, and kind of could further kind of grow a fan base.
What kind of year was this?
This was 2008, I believe, when I made my first EP.
Because you had a song on one of Amy Grant's albums, right?
I did.
How did that all happen?
Oh my. So I kind of look at it like this, going back to what my dad said about the songwriter aspect of it. One of the things that's so vital, I feel like, in making a career, and especially financially with music, is with your copyright, with owning your own publishing and being a songwriter, whether that's getting placements or getting songs cut or whatever. That's so vital. It's continuous money that comes in. I mean, obviously you have to be churning that stuff out in order for it to make a living. But I really wanted to write with other people and write for other people. And so when I was in my 20s, I started writing with people like Natalie Hemby and John Paul White, he was in a band called the Civil Wars, and a bunch of other what you call music row writers that were getting cuts on Carrie Underwood and at this time I didn't have a publishing deal, which you would have to have a publishing deal in order to get into those doors. But what I had was a lot of tenacity and a lot of determination. And I had people that really saw something in me and my voice. And I think they just saw the potential in me as an artist. So they wanted me to write with their writers. So I just started writing with these people, and she heard that song. Amy Grant heard that song, and she loved it, and she put it on her record, and it was my first cut. And that was a huge deal for me, because I grew up listening to her, and obviously she had crossover hits as well, but she's just one of the most lovely, most generous and kind people I've ever met. And so that was a huge deal for me.
At what point did you actually get to meet her? Was the song already placed on the album, or after the album was released?
The album had not come out yet. And Natalie Hemby, who's a songwriter here in Nashville, and she's in this band called The Highwomen, she was pregnant, and we were friends and still are friends. And so she was having a baby shower and Amy Grant hosted it at her house. So that was interesting. And so it was like a group of us girls at Amy Grant's house, and there's Vince Gill, and he's like, walking through with like those like big, huge glasses, like in his like, I don't know, like exercise outfits. And she's like showing us around the house, like in his studio. And he's got like all these guitars like lined up in his studio. I mean, it was pretty surreal. And that's sort of a Nashville experience too. It's like you're at the store and it's like, oh, there's Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban. Okay. Kind of like that. It's just like another normal day. Okay, great. I'm at a baby shower at Amy Grant and Ben Skill's house. Okay, cool. You know?
So crazy.
And it's pretty crazy. It's pretty wild. That is a perk of living in Nashville. You just like never know who you'll meet and who you'll run into. And I just find that it's such a magical place in that way.
I bet you have to keep your eyes peeled because they're just going to be the ordinary person walking down the street. And then it probably takes your brain a second they look really familiar.
Yeah, I've had so many times like that. Like I remember I went to a restaurant a couple of years back and Robert Plant and Patty Griffin were like sitting next to us. And I kept thinking, is that Robert Plant? You know what I mean? Like, it's like Robert Plant. Okay. You know, but they're people just like everybody else.
It's kind of just become this hub. Like everyone used to be all the musicians used to be out in Hollywood and Los Angeles, but now they're all kind of going down to Nashville and making the careers there.
Yeah, exactly.
How was you approached to be part of the Stephen Dorff film, Wheeler?
And that was a lucky thing as well. There was a songwriter that I had written with. His name was Bobby Tomberlin, and he was a successful Music Row writer. And we just always kept in touch and just stayed close throughout the years. And he was really good friends with Stephen and his brother, who has now passed, Andrew Dorff. And he called me up and he said, hey, he's like, I don't know if you'd be interested in doing this, but he said, Stephen is looking to do more of like what they call like a mockumentary. And they've had like all these people audition for it and they can't seem to find the right person. And I showed him a couple of videos of yours and I showed him your picture and he was into you doing it. Would you be up for doing it? And I was like, sure. I've never acted before, really. I mean, I've been in music videos, but let's do it. So I went on a Skype call with Stephen and we talked about it, talked about the film and what it was about and what would all entail. And I said, let's do it. It'll be fun. And it was one of the best experiences. And truly, I just got lucky. It's one of those things where it's like people say, you know, you just keep trudging and keep trudging and keep going. And eventually something will happen, you know, out of nowhere. I never expected that, but through that, it opened other doors. So, because
it's like you, Stephen, and Bobby, you're like the three main triangle of characters.
Yes.
If you can call them characters.
Yeah, I mean, we're really kind of just playing ourselves. I mean, Stephen really is the main character and the only sort of made up character, so to speak. But everybody else is pretty much real and sort of their real story.
Was you familiar with Stephen's work before that? The film Backbeat, which is about the Beatles, that's one of my all-time favorite films. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. I had met him, I think 4 years prior to us working together on the film through Bobby, because they had always been really good friends and through a Christmas party, I believe. And so Stephen was there and Stephen's dad, who's also a successful songwriter, he was there and Andrew was there. And so we met briefly through that. But, you know, obviously, I mean, he's just a phenomenal actor. And even like working with him, he can turn it on. I mean, he knows exactly, he has that innate intuitive ability. And it was a real treat to be around it and work with him.
How many, other than Bobby, how many of the other, let's call them real life characters in the film did you know prior to shooting?
It was such a fun experience. And I feel like it's so different than probably most films are done in that it wasn't scripted, really. I mean, it had a very loose script, but for the majority, it was just kind of like, you know, your intuition sort of thing. And then when we were first kind of putting everything together and doing pre-production, and Stephen had come to Nashville and was staying here for a bit while we filmed, he had asked me, he said, I need a couple more musicians. Is there anybody that you could suggest that would really fit this? And I said, Travis Meadows, who's one of my favorite songwriters and just this like really gruff kind of personality, but so kind and has such a great heart. And I said, he should be in it. And he has a great story. I mean, his actual life is really inspiring. And then there was another girl who's a friend of mine, and her name is Dorothy. And she has a band called the Danberries with her and her husband. It's more of like a bluegrass kind of folk band. And I asked her if she would be in it. And so those were two people that I really was passionate about having an opportunity to be in it and playing themselves as well. And who are just, you know, phenomenal like musicians in their own right.
Was you impressed with Stephen's vocals and also his songwriting? Was you like, wow, I wasn't expecting that?
Yeah. I mean, he's sort of a jack of all trades kind of guy. I mean, I think he's always been really super passionate about music. I mean, obviously it's in his blood. His brother was a songwriter and his dad's a songwriter. And so I think for him, it was really important to put this out and kind of have that opportunity to express himself in that way. And for people to see him in that way, not just I'm an actor, and to be taken seriously in that way as well. And so, yeah, I was really impressed by that.
How long was the whole movie shoot? And how long did you have to keep the whole thing under wraps and a secret for?
Oh, geez. Gosh, let's see. I want to say that Bobby had asked me to be in the film 2014. Let's see, the fall 2014, maybe. And then we did the filming in 2015, end of January, beginning of February. And the filming lasted for about 2 weeks. And we did it all in Nashville, except for one scene, which I flew out to LA, and we did that at Shangri-La, which is Rick Rubin's studio. And we did that out there in Malibu.
Which scene's that then?
That's at the very end when he and I are at the studio and he's being introduced to Kris Kristofferson. And we did that scene there. That was amazing. That was incredible. Was
there kind of like a whole, you got to keep this secret, especially when you're filming it?
Yeah, there was definitely that. And everybody, like we had done some scenes at the Bluebird, and we had done some scenes at this place called Douglas Corner, and which is now closed down. And everybody that was a part of it, yeah, there was a bit of a low key, hey, don't say anything. And it wasn't until like a year later until it was released. And so there was, yeah, like a hush hush on it.
So one of the key scenes is when Wheeler performs at, you mentioned it earlier, the Bluebird Cafe. When was the first time you performed there? That must have been a big deal for you.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I actually went there had such an impact on me before I even played there. And I actually went with a friend of mine. She told me about it and I saw the round. And that was one of my first introductions to the whole songwriter concept after my dad had mentioned that to me and gotten me a guitar and whatnot. And I knew that I wanted to come back there and play. That was like in my head, like I have to come back here and play because it's such a huge deal. It's such a monumental place to play. But I played my first show there, gosh, when I was probably like 21, 22, because they had this thing, I don't know if they still do it now, but open call or casting call or whatever, where you can get a chance to play there. And I went there when I was 17 and stood in line with my dad and got my stamp to come back and audition, but I didn't make it. They sent me a letter. I think I still have it, which was like, you did so good. Thanks for coming and auditioning, but whatever. Basically, I didn't get it. So I didn't get to perform and I was kind of crushed by that. I was like, oh man, but I never gave up and I still held on to that little stamp. It's like a little small piece of paper with like a Bluebird stamp on it. And I kept it in my wallet. And I've played, God, I don't know how many times since then, like 20, 30 times. And so it never loses its wonder. Every time I play there, I think I'm going to play like this is the last time I'll play here because this is like such a magical place.
How many people does it actually hold?
Oh gosh, not many. I want to say like, I'd have to look online, 30 maybe, 40, 50.
There's probably more musicians lined up wanting to play there than there is actually people who can get in.
Yes. Since they had that show Nashville, when that was aired, I mean, if you play a show there, no matter who it is, it sells out within minutes of the tickets opening. So when I play, I get 2 tickets that I can give to whoever. I think 2 tickets. And so it usually always goes to like a family or a friend, or I'll have some people reach out to me and they'll say, hey, is there any way I can get in? And I'll say, I have an extra ticket. But there's always a huge line of people wanting to get in. You know, I'm excited for that to open back up and get people back in there again.
How's the whole community been doing this past year? I would imagine it's been crazy.
Crazy. I mean, I feel like, you know, I don't even know. I mean, I feel like it's just a survival mode for a lot of people. I mean, you know, I think that a lot of people will probably decide whether or not it's for them during this time. And I was thinking about myself growing up, like playing my first show and having that be so exciting. I thought about people in that position who are in college now, or even in high school, who want to play shows, but there's nowhere to play shows because everything's shut down. You know, just having that momentum and that encouragement to get out and play, because that's so much a part of it in your career and in your building blocks.
There's enough hurdles anyway.
I know, right? So I just think, I mean, the Nashville community is so great and they really do come together and help each other out and support each other. There's Music Cares, which is a great organization for musicians who need financial help. And so I feel like, obviously, I mean, there's no doubt there are so many people that are really struggling, and there's people that touring is their main moneymaker, you know? So if they didn't have savings, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just hope that it turns back around. But the hopeful side of it is that we will always need music. We will always need art. We will always need that, you know? So if you can take the time to kind of hunker down and create, if you can, do it. And that's what I've been trying to do.
Because you do photography as well, right?
I do photography. My husband does photography, does videography and production. And so we got this whole little like family, like creative company within our house.
How was it for you meeting Kris Kristofferson during the shooting of the film? You say you flew out to LA for that scene.
I did. He is one of the most, I mean, he's just, when you meet him, you don't feel intimidated by him. There's some people that you would meet, I feel like, and there's just like, I don't even know what to say. But it's a weird thing. It's like, obviously you're intimidated by the legend of who he is, but he has such a kindness and gentleness to him that and warmness. And he doesn't make you feel, he's not unapproachable. You know, he makes you feel like you can come up to him. And it was he and his wife, Lisa, are so kind. And I remember being in the studio there and I said, I have this record. I had this EP that I had just made, which was kind of more of like a rock alternative record called the Bomb Shelter Sessions. And I had this song called Southern Cross on it, which is in the movie. And I wanted him to hear it. And they listened through the whole album right there in front of me. I could not believe it. Because most people will be like, oh yeah, thanks, I'll take that. They listened to the whole thing right in front of me. I was just...
Let's put it on now.
Exactly. That's exactly what his wife did. She said, I have my computer here. Let's put it in. Listen to the whole thing right there. I was like, I mean, I was just, I don't know if I was embarrassed, but I was shocked. I was like, are you sure you're going to do this right now? I mean, don't you have other things you want to do? And they did. And he was so kind to me and had the greatest things to say. And I remember I had this songwriting book that I carried around with me and I had him sign a piece of paper from it. And it said, I have it in my office and it says, thanks, Audrey, you take my breath away. Love, Kris. I was like,
Big tick, done. I'm finished. Don't go anywhere.
Yes. Yes. It was great. And so I kept a good relationship with them from that point on, because I feel like that's just vital if you do anything in any business. Keep good relationships with people.
You meet a hero of yours, then you have to work alongside him and act.
Yes. Yes. Pull it together. Pull your life together. You know what I mean? Go somewhere else in your head and just make it happen. Yeah, pretty much.
But he later recorded vocals for you on your Thornbed album, right?
Yes. And that was phenomenal. And that was one of those things where I sent an email to his wife. My husband and I were on our way to St. Simon's for a vacation. And I said to him, I just had this, and I randomly get these, these sort of like gut intuitive feelings where I have ideas, whether it's about songs or reach out to somebody or ideas or whatnot.
Do you ever get them early in the morning? I get them when I'm waking up.
Yes, I get them early in the morning. Sometimes I have dreams and I write them down. I'll remember my dreams. But I try to find that. I try to follow that intuition. And we were driving there and I just had this thought, what if, because we were talking about the album and I'd already recorded it. And I said, what if you think Kris would sing something with me? I mean, is that crazy? Because who am I? I mean, it's hard to get. I mean, I've had people that are like super, super famous and have wanted him on their album and couldn't get it. And because I think he's pretty particular about that kind of stuff. And my husband was like, you should just do it. Just reach out to him and see what he says. And so I wrote an email to his wife, Lisa. And I said, hey, this is probably a shot in the dark. And no worries if it doesn't work out. But I'm making this album called Thornbird. And I just was going to see if Kris might be interested in doing a duet with me for a song he's done, or maybe writing something with me. I mean, I just put it all out there. I was like, I'm just going for it. I mean, what do I got to lose? The worst they can say is no, don't write me back, whatever. So she wrote me back like that afternoon. And she was like, hey, she said, I talked to Kris and he would love to do that. He would love to either sing with you on something or, he can write something with you. And I was just like, what do you pick? But I thought, man, I want to sing with him. That would be incredible. And so it worked out. We just stayed in touch and he was getting honored in Nashville and it was a huge deal. And so he was going to be in town like right before I was about to master the record. And so we worked it out and he and his wife and son, and then his wife's parents came to the studio and we did it in one take. It was like now or never, because it's like one take with him. It's like you either get it or you don't.
So it wasn't like track your vocals and track his vocals.
It was in the same room at the same time in my husband's studio. It was like my husband was playing guitar and Kris and I were right next to each other and we just did it all live. And it was one of those things where I was so nervous.
That's like storytale stuff.
Oh yeah. I just kept thinking to myself as he was next to me, this is really happening. So you better bring it. You better do it. This is it. You got to like pull it together. So I was like, I'm going to do it.
Because that's a song he's done before, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I've always loved that song.
That must have been cool for him as well to revisit that song.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought it would be such a great take on it. at the age that he was then, because when he did it before, he, was obviously younger. And so Joni Mitchell had done an album where I think she redid a bunch of her songs in later years. And to hear the tonality difference in her voice, because she had lived so much life, I thought was such a cool take on her songs, and I thought that would be such a great version of that at the time that he is in his life. So yeah, once in a lifetime.
Did you enjoy the finished movie once Wheeler was finished? Was there a premiere or anything in Nashville?
Yes. Yeah, we did a premiere. Yeah, we did a premiere at BMI, like a private one with some label heads and publishers, and Steven was there and Bobby and a couple other people that had been in the film. It was very small, maybe 30 people there. And then we did an actual proper screening, and we had like a red carpet and different people were there. Holly Williams, Hank Williams' daughter, a couple other actors were there that weren't in the film, that were just friends of Steven, were there. And it was at the Belcourt Theater, which is a small independent theater in Nashville. And that was great. And it was received so well. And I was watching people's faces as they were watching the movie, just to kind of see, what people, if they were into it, if they were looking at their phone or whatever. And everybody was engaged and had such, I was really surprised because I didn't know how it was going to go, to have something that really wasn't scripted. But I think the thing that that I found that people connected with was the fact it hit on what it's like to move to Nashville and how fast things can happen depending on if you meet the right people at the right place at the right time, and how all that can unfold for someone's career. Because it is so much about connections.
I think it's so magical when Wheeler first arrives and you can see his excitement.
Yes, exactly.
Seeing the Ryman and all that kind of stuff. It's brilliant. You could translate that to anywhere.
Yes.
A musician trying to make a break, whether it's going to Hollywood or New York or just seeing like these places which you'd always dreamed of seeing.
Yes, exactly.
I think it really embodied that excitement. I think it's great.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, so many people that have that dream, that is such a staple for them to come into the city and to see it, and it becomes a reality at that point.
Did it give your music good exposure within the local community?
Yes, it did. It's kind of crazy because I've had, people reach out to me since then after seeing the movie, because the movie, I believe it is still streamed on Amazon and on our networks here. And, people that didn't, know who I was or anything, they connected with my music through that way from all over the world. And I've had people like send me messages through Facebook or Twitter, and they're like, "Oh, Gene Wheeler," or ask me different questions. And so that's, what more could you ask for as an artist, is just to have an opportunity for your music to get heard.
So what's next for you? You had your album Thornbed out in 2016.
2016.
Are there any new recordings in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I actually have another record that I was planning to put out last year, but obviously with all that stuff that happened. So I'm looking to this year, probably in the fall, to put it out. So that one's already finished and done. I already have the artwork and everything. So I'm just kind of getting the plan together for that release. And my hope is to, do some touring here and to go over to the UK and do some shows there as well. And then I'm writing for another record. I'm in the process of doing that. So the one record that I've always wanted to write, and, during all this sort of kind of downtime, really put a focus on that, which is kind of write a record that's more blues and soul and gospel and all that kind of good darkness, minor music that I love, and make a record out of that concoction.
Is there anybody else who you'd like to collaborate with?
Oh gosh, there's so many people. There's so many people that I would love to work with. I like to write by myself, and I always have. Just love to write by myself. I would love to write with Laura McKenna. I love her. And as far as collaborate goes, in my wildest dreams, there's one person that I would love to meet, collaborate with, work with, would be Jeff Lynne. I'm a huge ELO fan. In fact, it's it's the best concert I've ever seen. I saw him last year, and I'm just a huge fan of his. I love his songs, all of his albums.
Got to put it out there, put it out in the world. You never know.
Jeff Lynne.
Awesome. Well, thank you ever so much. I've loved chatting with you. I appreciate you taking the time. That was great.
Thank you so much.
thank you so much to Audrey Spillman for taking the time to talk to me here on the Straight to Video podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and please visit audreyspillmanmusic.com to keep up to date with future releases. And also the film Wheeler is available to pick up on DVD, or you can also rent and stream online. Please let me know if you get a chance to watch and what you think. Hopefully you'll love it as much as I do. So for now, thanks everyone for listening. Please continue to like, share and follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please spread the word to anyone who might enjoy them too. As always, I've been your host, Rob Lane. Make sure you all take care out there, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.